My name is Howard Eber, and I am an alcoholic. I'm an addict, I should say. Out of respect to the true nature of my disease, because it didn't matter whether I drank it, swallowed it, snorted it, smoked it, shot it, or shoved it. My motto was, wet or dry, just get me high. And I didn't realize it was not about the name of the chemical. It's the name on the birth certificate that's the problem. So if I mention a chemical by name here today, or a method of ingestion, please don't be put off. But we're probably not going to run into that because I'm going to do something different. I first want to thank Andy for asking me to be here. As I understand it, this is the inaugural meeting of this group. And I'm really honored to be asked to kind of kick it off like this. And I love the concept that Andy was telling me about, that each week there'll be a different speaker, and that speaker will kind of set the format. You want to tell a story, you want to talk about history, you want to address a step, etc. And I like that kind of box of chocolates approach, Eddie, where you never know what you're going to get, right? And what I wanted to talk about today is a statement that Bill makes in the book about our written fourth step. I want to talk about the importance of writing the fourth step according to the directions in this book. I'm going to avoid moralizing, like working it the right way, working it the only way, working it the best way. I'm not going to do any of that. What I'm talking about is working the fourth step as I understand and as I have been taught, directly out of the big book. When it says to do something, I do it. If it doesn't say it, I don't do it. I follow those directions. And the line that I'm referring to that I think is so important here is on page 66. The bottom paragraph contains the line that it held the key to the future. Bill is talking about these grids, these fourth step lists that we'll be working on. And he says it holds the key to the future. And I think that has a double meaning in that it holds the key to the future in terms of our lives because it will guide us to this spiritual basis of thought upon which we will base all of our future decisions and actions. So what we take from this step process is the key to our future living. Beyond working the active steps and living in 10, 11, and 12, that's the key to our future. But it's also the key to the future of our step work. It is placed, I believe, not by accident, right at the beginning of the fourth step, where Bill is telling us, giving us the directions about how to do this fourth step. He gives us an assignment, and he's telling us basically, be careful with these lists, because these hold the key to the future. Why am I emphasizing that? Because I've heard, and I'm sure there are a lot of people here as well, suggestions like when you're done with your fifth step, you should burn your fourth step. I've heard that said at conventions, and it is so wrong. Do not burn your fourth step. If we achieve nothing here today, it's to show you that the information on this fourth step grid will be used to work the fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, and ninth step. And if you burn this grid, you will not have the data that you need to work those steps. And aside from that, nowhere in this book does it say to burn your book. Burn your inventory. But before I get too deep into that rabbit hole of the key to the future, let me just set the scene, so to speak. The first part of the 12th step makes us a promise. Having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, that's the first part of the 12th step. It is perhaps the greatest promise that AA has to offer, that CA has to offer. But what does it mean? Well, in the Spiritual Experience Appendix at the back of the book, Appendix number 2, if you have a second edition or a third edition, we're told that a spiritual experience, spiritual awakening, is nothing more than a personality change sufficient to recover from a hopeless state of mind and body. And incidentally, without getting too deep into it, the only difference between a spiritual awakening and a spiritual experience, according to the book, is the time element. Spiritual experience happens suddenly, like Bill's experience where he felt he was up on a mountaintop and felt the hand of God, or Fitzmayo's experience when he got down on his knees at Towns Hospital and had one of those instant, like burning bush moments. That's a spiritual experience. Most of us have spiritual awakenings, which happen gradually over a period of time, of the educational variety, if you will. As we do this work, we learn more and more and are along this journey to a full awakening spiritually. But like I said, the book says that spiritual awakening is defined as a personality change. Well, what then does personality mean? Well, what really does that mean? Well, if you look up the word personality in a dictionary, one of the definitions we're going to come across is our attitude and outlook upon life, people, places, and things. Let me repeat that. Our personality is made up of our attitude and outlook upon people, places, and things. So our objective, this successful consummation, as Bill says on page 25, the successful consummation of working these steps is not a religious conversion. I thought it was. You see a word spiritual, and I thought, oh, we're talking religion here. That's not what this is about. The successful consummation of working the steps is not a religious conversion. It is a thinking conversion. It is a change in psychic attitude. And psychic means up here. A change in our way of thinking. Well, why then is that necessary? Right? I mean, what possible significance does the way I think have to do with my drinking? We're talking about an activity and you're talking about something else. Well, in the doctor's opinion, we learn some key information here. We learn that we have a twofold malady made up of a physical allergy, which ensures that we cannot drink so much as a single drink or have a single line or a pill or what have you without triggering the allergic reaction of craving. And that craving is the physical manifestation, the appearance, the result of our allergy. And that craving, basically, I don't have to explain it to anyone. You all know. The first one asks for the second insists on the third demands the fourth roars out for the fifth, and on and on and on. But that's not the end of it, because we have a twofold condition that is made up of this physical allergy and a mental obsession. And that mental obsession tells us we don't have an allergy. So if I've got a body that says no and a mind that says yes, then I've consequently become powerless over alcohol. And on page 23 of the book, Bill writes, all of that would be academic. All of that information about the physical allergy would be academic if we never gave in to the obsession and, quote, took the first drink, thereby setting the terrible cycle of craving into motion. Therefore, the main problem of the alcoholic centers in his mind, which tells him he can drink, rather than in his body that ensures that he can't. So if we're wondering why are we talking about the way that we think, well, we cannot ever change our physical reaction to these chemicals. If you're allergic to something, you're in for life. You got an allergy to strawberries, nothing's going to change that. You eat a strawberry, you're always going to have a reaction, hives or what have you. So we cannot change that part of our condition. But our condition is made up of two parts. Physical allergy that we can never change, and a thinking problem. Remember, taking that first drink was the worst decision we ever made. And we did it when we were sober. Can't blame it on the booze. The worst decision we ever made we made when we were straight. We were not high. We were not drunk. So we have to change our thinking process. And in step 3, Bill says we make a decision. And incidentally, that's all we really do in the 3rd step, is make a decision. Sometimes I go to meetings and I hear people talk about the 3rd step, and they go on and on and on about turning their will over and their life over. No. The first few words of the step tell us what it's about. Make a decision. That's all I do in the 3rd step, is decide to do something. To do what? To turn my will, which is my thinking process, and my life, which are my actions, over to the care of my Creator. Now, I don't know about anyone else, but I didn't have trouble equating lives with actions. I mean, what is my life but a collection, a sum total collection of all of my actions? That's my life. So I understand how life could mean actions. But I didn't really grasp how will equals thinking. And I was taught something that really helped, and maybe this will simplify it for some folks also. I'm not a kid anymore. I'm very conscious of the limited amount of time I have left on this earth. And so I have a lot of things. I'm not a wealthy man, but I have a lot of things that when I go, I like to make sure where they wind up. So I've sat down with a pen and a pad and I wrote out, this is where I want my big book to go to. This is where I want my Allman Brothers CD and DVD collection to go to. This is where I want this to go to, and so on. And I have that list all together, and then I take that collection of my thoughts and bring it to an attorney who basically just rewrites it, stamps it, and charges me, and calls that declaration, that compilation of my thoughts, a will. A will is a collection of my thoughts on any given moment, on any given subject. The will is a collection of my thoughts about my possessions when I'm not here anymore. So, notice the order, incidentally. The wording of the step says we turned our will and our lives over. Just a quick show of hands. Anyone ever hear someone read that at a meeting and say, we made a decision to turn our lives and our will over? Did you ever hear someone do that? It's not what it says. It says will and lives. Will comes first. Why? I'm not nitpicking. I'm not being, overly analytical. All action is born in thought. I cannot reach out and pick up this cup of tea without my brain communicating to my shoulder, to my arm, to my wrist, to my hand, to my fingers, to commit the action of picking up this cup of tea. Excuse me. So that all action is born in thought. So if I want to eliminate the action of using from my life, I first have to change the thinking that leads to that. Because again, all action is born in thought. If the action of using is what I want to be cleared of, get out of my life, then I have to find out what are the thoughts that lead to my making that decision, that worst decision I ever made. And I cannot blame it on the booze or the drugs because I made that decision when I wasn't under the influence. So there's something else motivating it. When I make stupid decisions when I'm high, I could blame it on the chemicals. But I can't do that. So if I want to eliminate that action from my life, I must really find out what are the thoughts that are causing me to do that. And looking back over my life, I cannot identify a single problem, a single challenge, an emotional disturbance that isn't caused by one of the following 3 thoughts. Number 1, I'm angry as hell about something. Number 2, I'm scared to death about something. And 3, I'm filled with guilt and shame and remorse as a result of the harms that I've done other people. So that means that up until that point, my life has been dominated by those thoughts, by those angers, by those fears, and by my harms. If every emotional disturbance comes down to one of those three things, that means that anger, fear, and harms, guilt and shame from harms, have been dominating my thoughts. So understanding that a sick mind cannot heal a sick mind, step one tells us that we're in need of a power greater than ourselves to solve our problem. That's what step two tells us. And so in step three, I decide to pursue that power that can do for me what I couldn't do for myself by immediately implementing a plan of action, beginning with our fact-finding, that's our searching, and fact-facing, that's our fearless fourth step personal inventory. And on page 64, Bill says that this inventory was an effort to face and be rid of the things in ourself which have been blocking us. So the point of this inventory is to find the things that are in between me and my Creator. That, going on 64, he says that self, manifested in various ways, was what had defeated us. So we considered its common manifestations. And what are the common manifestations of self that have caused me my problems? I just said them. My angers, my fears, and the guilt and the shame I carry around as a result of harms I've done that motivates me to do these things. So that's what's been ruling, controlling, and dominating my life up until the point where I start my fourth step. But what does my life look like? Let's take a look at what our life looks like. If you got your book and you want to turn to page 52, I'm going to describe to you what my life was like before the fourth step. I was having trouble with personal relationships. I couldn't control my emotional nature. I was a prey to misery and depression. I couldn't make a living. I had a feeling of uselessness. I was full of fear. I was unhappy, and I couldn't seem to be of real help to other people. That's what my life looked like. And if I break that down even further, it tells me I'm suffering from a spiritual, mental, and physical disease. How do I know that? Well, let me go through it again. The first thing, I'm having difficulty with trouble with personal relationships. That's the physical dimension, the world and everything in it. If I'm having trouble with everybody around me, then I've got a physical malady. Numbers 2 through 5, we couldn't control our emotional natures. We were a prey to misery and depression, couldn't make a living, and had a feeling of uselessness. Was about my mental problems, my thinking problems. And my spiritual disease manifests itself in the fact that I was full of fear, I was unhappy, and I couldn't seem to be of real use to other people. So before I work that fourth step, I am sick, spiritually, mentally, and physically. So if I want to get better, then what I have to do is to find those things that are blocking me from that power. So on page 64, Bill gives us our first assignment. And incidentally, I want to just define some terms here, because sometimes we could assume things that aren't necessarily intended. I believe that the fourth step, the entire fourth step, is one big resentment list. That too often I hear people, if this topic is resentment, people talk about angers. Well, resentment doesn't equal anger, but anger is a resentment. Resentment defined means to re-feel things. RE means to do something again. Whenever you put RE in front of any word, it means we're doing it again. The second part of the word, sentiment, comes from the Latin word sentire, which means to feel. So the word resentment really breaks down and means re-feeling. I'm going to re-feel my angers. I'm going to re-feel my fears. I'm going to re-feel the sources of guilt and shame. So the whole process is a resentment list. And Bill tells us that resentment is the number one offender. It kills more of us than anything else. That's what we do from the moment we come to in the morning till the moment we pass out at night, or whenever we pass out, is all we do is ruminate about all the things that this one did or didn't do. And if they didn't do anything, we're ruminating about what they're thinking of doing. Our whole life was governed by that. So knowing that resentment is the whole process. The first assignment Bill says to do on page 64 at the bottom, we listed people, institutions, and principles with whom we were angry. Can you see that? Everyone see that? Yes? Good. Okay.
Yes.
This is just an example, a prompt sheet, if you will. If we're going to list people, principles, and institutions, it's helpful to know exactly what does he mean. Well, I never met an alcoholic or an addict who didn't know exactly who they were angry at. So people, I think that's pretty easy. We know the people we're pissed off at. Institutions, I think that's just as easy. You know, are we angry at at the correctional system, at the IRS, armed services, or rehabs, a political party, a particular religion, step study workshops? What institution pisses us off? Principles takes a little bit more thought. Principles are things that are kind of drilled into our head that cause us problems. For example, one of my friends put down the principle of all men are created equal. Now, why would he put that down? It's true, all men are created equal. But you see, he's black, and that was not his truth. So every time he heard someone say all men are created equal, it pissed him off, because that was not his experience. One of my friends put down real men don't cry, because as a kid, from the earliest age he could remember, anytime he cried, he got the back of the hand from his father. Real men don't cry. I think every one of us have things that our parents drill into our heads as we're growing up that cause us pain. For example, on my list, I put down never strike another person, because that's what my parents taught me, and P.S., that's what I taught my son. Because I believe it. I firmly believe that you never put your hand on another person in anger. But you see, I was always the shortest kid in school. I wore glasses in the 2nd grade, had braces in the 4th grade, was always overweight. I got picked on. And I never fought back, because my parents taught me that you never strike another human being. And while I felt I was doing the right thing, I was doing what my parents want me to do, I felt like a coward. I felt less than. I felt inadequate, that I couldn't defend myself. I never gave it a try, but I didn't reach out and do that because my parents said not to. So never strike another person is on my list. Here's one that shows up a lot. The golden rule. Do unto others. My mother, may she rest in peace, always told me that. Do unto others. But I thought that meant do unto others and they will do unto you the same. That's not what it says. It says do unto others as you would have them do unto you. So I grew up with enormous expectations and disappointments of people, because I treated you in a certain way and you didn't reciprocate. You treated me differently. Why is that? The golden rule says you're supposed to treat me the same way I treated you. That's not real life. So the first assignment we have in this fourth step is to list. Remember Bill said we listed people? I don't know where people get the notion that we're supposed to write out our life story. But in the fourth step, we do not write our life story. The fourth step is a series of lists. We make a list, and then he tells us another list, and you'll see in a moment what I'm talking about. But the first column in our inventory is a list of names. Okay? On the bottom of page 64, Bill gives us the next assignment. He says, we set them on paper, we listed people, institutions, and principles with whom we were angry. Here's the second part, and the third part for what it's worth. He said, we asked ourselves why we were angry. So column 2 is, why are these people on the list? What did they do to deserve a special place in hell? Second column is, why are they on this list? In most cases, it was found that our self-esteem, pocketbooks, ambitions, personal relationships were hurt or threatened. Those things, our self-esteem, ambitions, relationships, pocketbooks, those are basic instincts, God-given basic instincts. So the next question Bill is asking us is, after we've identified what the person did to make us angry, now we're asking ourselves, where did the hammer hit us? You see, I can't be angry at you unless you do something that interferes, that hurts, or threatens one of my basic God-given instincts of life. Did you do something that got between me and my friends and relatives? You interfered with my personal relationships. Did you interfere with my pride, how the world sees me? You embarrassed me in front of others. Did you do something that made me feel less than? My self-esteem was affected. Did you do something that cost me money? You affected my financial security. So what basic instinct was hurt or threatened by what that person did? And on the top of page 65, Bill repeats the instructions for those two columns. He says, on our grudge list, and the grudge list is just column 1, the list of names. We set opposite each name our injury. What did they do? So column 1, the name. Column 2, what did they do? And then was it our self-esteem, security, ambitions, relations, personal, sexual relations, which had been interfered with? Column 3, our basic instincts. Allow me to show you. All right, here we go. This is what the columns should look like. Okay, and incidentally, I should go back a step. I got a little ahead of myself here, because I want to show you one thing before that, how to set this up. There it is. All right, let me make it so you can see this. Okay, we need to get ourselves a notebook, a simple notebook, because we have to write this. The instructions are we write down these things. So in column 1, we have a list of names. In this first column, we have a list of names. I'm angry at my cousin Jack, okay? Column 2, why? What did they do to deserve a special place in hell? Well, in this case, I pissed off my cousin Jack because he molested me. So in column 2, I just write the word molest. Do not write out a whole story here, bullet points. You know what happened. Just write bullet points to remind you when you sit and do your fifth step what to talk about. Nobody, let me repeat that, nobody is going to read your fourth step. You are going to use it as a script, as an outline, for which you will tell your story to your sponsor in the fifth step based on those lists. So in the second column, we have a list of causes. What did they do? In the third column, we list what basic instinct was hurt or threatened. And one of the beautiful things about the inventory, as the big book writes it, is that It's multiple choice. Let me show you. We don't really have to do a heck of a lot of thinking on this one. Okay, here's the actual grid. Column 1, I'm angry at, listed people, institutions, and principles from page 64. The cause, I asked myself why I was angry. What did they do to cause that anger? What basic instinct was hurt or threatened? Now, all of these terms, self-esteem, pride, emotional security, relations, ambitions, those are all out of the Big Book and the 12 and 12. I didn't add anything. I didn't make up anything. Those are the basic instincts that Bill mentions in those books. So it's multiple choice. I'm angry at this cousin because he molested me. What was affected? Well, obviously my self-esteem, my physical security, my sex relations, and so on. Easy. Just check it off. Okay? And then Bill says on page 67, he says, he points out that to conclude that others were wrong was as far as most of us ever got. So now we begin to look at things from a different angle. The part they played. Columns 1, 2, and 3, the things I did, they did. They did this, it affected my this. Columns 4 and 5 are what part I played in it. Column 4, put out of mind the wrongs others have done. We resolutely look for our own mistakes, is what Bill says on 67. So what did I do, if anything, to set in motion trains of circumstances which in turn caused people or institutions to hurt me? So we're looking at two things in this fourth column. What did I do that created the situation in the first place? I keep going back to this cousin who molested me. I did nothing. In cases of abuse, physical, sexual, mental, we did nothing to cause that. So we didn't do anything to cause the event. But my cousin stopped molesting me when I was 14. And for the next 40 years, every time I thought of him, my blood pressure went up, my stomach was in a knot, I got really pissed off. So I did something that allowed me to have the resentment, to re-feel these things long after the event is finished. It ended at age 14. I didn't let go of it and deal with it till I was in my 50s. What did I do? I harbored it, I allowed it, I was victimized, I had expectations, etc. And then this fifth column is really what I call the money column, because this is what defect came out as a result of that anger. Again, multiple choice. This comes right out of page 67 and the fourth step essay in the 12 and 12. Was I frightened, irresponsible, inconsiderate, dishonest, selfish, self-seeking, judgmental? Pick it out. Again, I'll go back to the situation with my cousin. I was frightened. I was dishonest because I never told anyone about it. By omission, I lied. I was irresponsible because when I went off to college, this cousin continued to babysit for my kid brother and other kids in my family. And because I never told on him, I put other people in harm's way. I was irresponsible. I was also inconsiderate because if he loved me like the kid brother he says he did, there's something wrong with him to do what he did to me. That he is sick in self too. Some basic instinct of his is out of proportion, is out of whack, that motivated him, that ruled, controlled, and dominated him to hurt me. So I'm being inconsiderate because I'm not factoring into this the fact that he is sick in self too. Now, what does this have to do with what I was talking about at the beginning? Right here. Okay, here's the top of that grid again. Column 1 has the information that we're going to use in the 8th and 9th step. When it comes time to do the 8th and 9th step, we go back to this. How do I know that? Because it says it in the book. I'll come back to it in a minute. I'll show you how Bill says that. In column 3, we're going to be using that in step 5, because if our sponsor knows what he's doing, if he's been through this process, he'll be able to point out some basic instincts that we didn't see, and he did. And columns 4 and 5 are really all about step 5, 6, and 7. Step 5, the defects that we have listed here in column 5, those are the nature of our wrongs that we're going to look at in step 5. Those are the defects of character that we're going to want to be free of in step 6. And those are the shortcomings we're going to ask God to remove in step 7. The information in column 5 here is really a guide for those steps, because the information here is critical in those steps. So if I burn my 4th step, where am I going to get the information for steps 8, 6, and 7? I don't. Remember, these lists, these grids, hold the key to our future. That's how important they are. And once I had done all of those 5 columns for my angers, I then did a similar thing with fears. Now, fears is a little bit different. On the top of page 68, Bill gives us 2 assignments on this inventory. The first thing he says is, we reviewed our fears thoroughly. We put them on paper. So that means we made a list of our fears. Irrational fears, incidentally. There's rational and irrational fears. Rational fears are normal. Most people have some degree of fear for, say, a dentist. It's not a pleasant experience, but you do what you have to do. If some people have a fear of a dentist to the point where they never go, and in the end they wind up having all their teeth pulled and have a much worse experience than if they had been going all along, that's an irrational fear, because it's gotten out of proportion. So we're looking at those irrational fears, the fears that have gotten out of proportion, that have ruled, controlled, and dominated us adversely. And then on 68, line 3 here, he says, we asked ourselves why we had them. Column 2, why do we have these things? Let me show you. Maybe it'll be easier to look at it than to describe it. Okay. Here's what it looks like. What do I do? Oh, there it is. Okay. So his first question is, we listed them. We reviewed our fears thoroughly. So we write down, I'm afraid of this, I'm afraid of that, I'm afraid of that, whatever it is. Second assignment, he says, we asked ourselves why we had them. That's what I just read. Why? And here's a beautiful thing about it. He gives you the answer. Right after it. Right after where it says we asked ourselves why we had it, he says the following. Wasn't it because self-reliance failed us? Self-reliance was good as far as it went, but it didn't go far enough. Some of us once had great self-confidence, but it didn't fully solve the fear problem or any other. When it made us cocky, it was worse. So he's telling us that the reason why we had our fears is over-reliance on self, finite self, rather than infinite creator. And I think sometimes it's helpful to ask ourselves these 3 questions when it comes to fear. What am I afraid of losing? What am I afraid of not getting? What am I afraid of being found out about? If I have a fear, say, of intimacy, I'm afraid of losing face if I let that wall down. I'm afraid of not getting what I want, of not getting into a sexual relationship if I have that fear and it stops me from ever pushing through that fear. What is it that will be revealed that I don't want you to know about? That I'm not God's gift to women. There's always an answer to these questions in every one of our fears. And then the third thing Bill says to do on the bottom of page 68 is we ask him to remove our fear, whatever it is, and direct our attention to what he would have us be. In other words, we ask God to help remove this fear and replace it with courage, to act courageously. And once we do that, we commence to outgrow that fear. We haven't outgrown it, we've just identified it and realized that the key to getting over it is not, well, just walk through your fear. Now I walk through my fear with my Creator. he's helping or she's helping me get through that fear. And then Bill says, now about sex. And Bill is not asking us to put down everybody we ever had a relationship with. He gives us the criteria. He said we subject each relation to this test. Was it selfish or not? Did I engage in this activity for selfish reasons, for pride, self-esteem, emotional security, financial security? Was there some other reason rather than mutual satisfaction or reproduction? And I'm going to start rushing here because I'm really running a little late and long. But it's the same thing. The list looks very much the same. This is guided by the directions in the book. I'll show you what I mean. We get out that notebook and we write out our sex inventory grid. Who did I hurt? What did I do? Then Bill says it's affect what basic instinct was affected. Remember, we subjected each to this test. Was it selfish or not? How do I know if it was selfish? I look at this list of words. Did I do it for reasons of self-esteem? For reasons of pride? For reasons of financial security? Again, he provides the answer in the book. All we're doing is throwing it up on a grid. And then it changes a little bit. That fourth column is, we then ask ourselves, what feelings did we unjustifiably arouse in others? Putting ourselves in their place. How do I think it made them feel? And we're not saying that to go call everybody you ever had sex with and ask them, did I hurt you? I was talking to someone the other day who said they did that. That's not what we're asking. Put yourself in their position. If you are carrying guilt and shame because you think you've hurt them, okay, then you've hurt them. Put it down. And in column 4, how would you feel if it happened to you? Jealous, suspicious, angry, fearful, bitter? And then the final 5th column, once again, is what defect came out as a result of it. And when I do this same exact list that's in front of me for my angers, I know I have to go back to the list because Bill tells me to do that. For the harms list, he tells us on page... sorry about that. He says we have a list. We have a list of persons we harmed. We made it when we took inventory. Okay? So we have a list for the hurts, the harms. So we do a separate 5-column grid on harms. And then when we have all of these lists together, we go to our sponsor and we tell our life story through this. I'm angry at this guy because of this. It hurt this. It affected that. This defect came out as a result of it. And I tell my life story through these grids. Only the things on these papers are relevant. And when I'm finished with my 5th step, I was told to pause and reflect on the effect those thoughts have had on my life. And I realized, I'm going to show you this. I'm trying to go as fast as I can. One of the things I realized in my 5th step is that these thoughts are really what caused my downfall. When I made decisions based on self, because I was one of those things in that 5th column, I was frightened, I was irresponsible, dishonest, selfish, self-seeking, judgmental. When I made a decision based on that, I was in collision with somebody and something. I was in conflict spiritually, mentally, and physically. And according to the book, when we run into that force that we're in conflict with, when we step on their toes, what happens? They retaliate. In other words, they push back. And when you push back, what do? I get angry, fearful. I act in a harmful manner. In other words, I get resentful. And when I'm resentful, I drink and I drug. So now I know why I have to change those thoughts. Because the self-centered thoughts led to the drinking and drugging. If I want to eliminate the action of drinking and drugging, I must go back to what is the thought that created it. And now I know what it is. Those words in column 5 of our inventory. That's what created it. And in my 6th step, I look at that handful of defects. Column 5 from my 4th step. So if I've burned it, I don't have anything to go back to. In step 6, I look at that list of defects and say, I don't want to be that person anymore. I'm ready to change. And that's all I have to do in step 6. And in step 7, I'm given a formula for how to change. From the moment I came into recovery, people said, you got to change, you got to change, you got to change. No one ever told me how, what, or why. I now know all of those things. I know what has to change because of my 4th and 5th step. I know why it has to change because of the work between the 5th and the 6th step. And I now know how to change it because I've been given this little formula in step 7. And step 7 is really probably our most misunderstood step of all. I mean, people think it's just a prayer. Here, God, remove my shortcomings. But the 7th step isn't a microwave. I don't pop in a prayer and pop out perfection. I got work to do. And the work begins with having identified all of those defects. I must one by one identify the opposite. Those will be my assets. And then when I run into one of them, smack dab into one of them on a daily basis, I was to stop. We pause when agitated. That's what the book says. We invite God in and ask us to act on the asset and not the defect. And with his help and all of the willpower at my command, because that's the other part I have to play, is the proper exercise of the will. With his help and my will, I act on the asset and not the defect. And gradually, over a period of time, my life changes. I've discarded those old ideas and attitudes. And if I've done that for a while, I was ready to face the past and take responsibility for my past actions and behaviors. And so in my 8th step, I made a list of all persons I had harmed. Where do I get the names for the people I harmed? From my 4th step grid. So if I've thrown it away, the key to the future work in steps 8 and 9 is gone. I don't have the data I need. We don't burn our 4th step, because I go back to it now in the 8th step and I pick out the names that I've harmed. And then I sit down and get ready spiritually by asking God for help. And I get ready logistically by sitting with my sponsor and figuring out who, what, when, where, how, and why. And when he agrees I'm ready, I go out and I make peace with mankind in the 9th step. And once again, I'm told to reflect. On page 83 and 84 are what people refer to as the 9th step promises. And what that does is it describes our life now, having worked the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th step. And if we compare it to those bedevilments on page 52, they line up perfectly, 1 to 1. Our life has changed. As a result of the first 3 steps, we get right spiritually. As a result of 4, 5, 6, and 7, we get right mentally. As a result of 8 and 9, we get right physically with the world and everything in it. We are in harmony spiritually, mentally, and physically. Perhaps for the first time in my life, I'm healthy in those 3 basic dimensions of life. And if I'm in harmony spiritually, mentally, and physically, I'm now walking in what Bill describes as the 4th dimension of existence. Now, I've done a lot of work to get here, and I'm not willing to go backwards. So Bill has given me a recipe for continued spiritual growth in the 10th, 11th, and 12th step. And the 10th step is my daytime walking around step. It's the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th step all rolled into one. I get pissed off at 9 in the morning. I reach into my head. I pull out that anger list. Who am I angry at? What did they do? What basic instinct was hurt or threatened? What part did I play? What defect came out? Now I know the defect that's generating all of this nonsense. I talk to someone about it. I ask God to help me convert it to an asset. If I've done something wrong, I then make immediate amends. And by 9:15, I'm done with it. And I challenge anybody to work the 10th step on a daily basis and not grow spiritually. I don't think you can do that. And in my 11th step, I sought to enhance my vital 6th sense of God consciousness through prayer, which is asking, and meditation, which for me is active listening all through the day. Because I may get the answers to my prayers from any number of sources, a billboard, a radio, something you say at a meeting. If the tuner is on, I'll get the message when it's transmitted. And the 12th step is a 3-part step: a promise, a charge, and a challenge. First part of the step is the greatest promise of all, this spiritual awakening as a result of doing that work. But nothing in life is free. So we're being handed a bill. We're being charged with the responsibility in the second part of the 12th step, which is to tell people of my experience and to help them to have the same. Mass production of spiritual awakenings is what our 12 steps are all about. And the third part of the 12th step is the greatest challenge of all: to practice these principles, these steps, in all of my affairs. And if I could do that, if I could put the steps to work in every part of my life, when I'm driving, when I'm dealing with family, when I'm working with co-workers, when I'm in the express line in the grocery store with 3 items and the lady in front of me has 103. How's my program working now, Howard? Put those steps to work in every part of our lives. And let me just wrap up with a quick statement. I think everybody here, we are very special people. We've been blessed with a condition, the solution for which stands to make us better people than we ever thought possible. We've been given an opportunity, not a guarantee, an opportunity to live 2 lifetimes in one. Think about that. That which we had or have, and that which we never thought possible. All through the grace of the God-given program of the 12 steps. It is, as Bill Wilson says in this book, an opportunity not to be missed. So, until we meet again, may God bless you all. May you all find your light. Thank you so much for having me and giving me the time to do this. Bless you.
Thank you, Howard.
God bless you, Howard. Thank you.